Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.
Hello and welcome back to the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. You are once again here with me, Amy Mitchell, and my co-host Ross Cooper. Interesting topic today. This is something that I think Ross and I have come across a number of times during our working life, and something that we've kind of often talked about and thought actually this makes a good topic to get into the meat of here on the podcast. We're kind of looking at the ethics of when we choose to intervene with a horse's clear pain issues or even subtle pain issues. What is the motivation behind that intervention? What are we trying to achieve? And, you know, is this something that we should be doing? For example, steroid injections into joints. Is this something that we should be doing in order to extend the working life of the horse? You know, where does the line sit between making the horse comfortable and improving the horse's quality of life versus keeping the horse going just so that we can have a longer riding career with it and enjoy doing the things that we enjoy doing? And I don't think there's a clear-cut, straightforward set of answers to some of this. I think there are certain situations where it's very clear that the wrong thing is being done. But I also think there's a lot of grey areas and kind of ethical discussions to be had around it. This came up for me because I've seen a horse recently that I personally feel quite strongly shouldn't be being ridden. But that the vet who is owning that horse's case is happy to keep putting repeated cortisone injections into the horse in order to keep it, in inverted commas, sound enough to keep being ridden. Which, for this particular horse, I quite strongly disagree with. So it's this is where it came up, I think, because I voice noted you, didn't I, Ross, and said, this is really bothering me.
I remember that one.
Yeah. And then, and the conversation kind of went from there. And interestingly, I went, just giving another kind of story for context, I went on a gait training day. It's a few years back now when I got my gait assessment tool. I went on a training day for it. And there was myself, one of my barefoot colleagues, a vet from Newmarket, and a number of farriers there. And at one point, we'd been out and we'd looked at a horse move, and it was obvious to all of us that the horse had hind end issues. And then we ran the gait analysis tool and kind of compared what we could see by eye versus what the gait tool was telling us. Then we got into a discussion after that about, okay, so we all agree that, you know, what's going on, there's problems with the hind end here. What would you do about it? And there was a lot of discussion about, you know, the vet coming up with some ideas as to what could be done in terms of diagnostics and injecting this joint and injecting that joint. And the farriers were coming up with some various different shoeing packages to be able to help. My question was, well, why would you not just get the horse a good body worker, turn them out for a few months, allow the body time to heal? You know, that's the approach I'd be advocating. And the answer that came back was, well, yeah, if this was just solely a horse-focused conversation, yes, that's probably the best thing for the horse. However, the farrier that was talking to me was saying a lot of his clients are very competition focused. and the horse is very much a tool, and that they're going to have zero interest in giving the horse 6 months. You know, they want that horse as sound as possible to finish the competition season, which I really struggle with. Now, because of the nature of the work that I do, you know, the vast majority of my clients don't have that mindset. But it's, I feel like there's a big, for me, there's a clear end of a spectrum where it's unethical, and then there's a murky area in the middle. So yeah, I'm interested to get your input on this, Mr. Cooper.
The field has just been blown wide open. Um,
Yeah. Boom.
I think I think ultimately it becomes that murky middle ground area. It's when we start to question if the practice is ethical, if it's unethical, and then the aspect of welfare, because ethics and welfare are different. Welfare is usually bounded by more legalities and monitored, whereas ethics is very subjective. And I think this is why it differs so much from person to person, because our own viewpoint is going to be very much different from the person sat next to us, which I think is a great thing. But when it comes to working with sentient beings, live animals, we're needing to be a little bit more objective as to what's actually in front of us, what can realistically be done, and also for what purpose. So
Yeah.
I think that brings it to what is the agenda, or is there an agenda behind wanting our horses to heal and
Yeah.
how we get them to that point?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I made some notes before we started this conversation. One of the things that I'd wrote down is, what's the goal of a treatment that we're giving? Are we in, intending to help the horse, or are we just trying to enable continued use of that horse?
Yes. And I think this goes down to so much about what we speak about and what is so prevalent in the community is the human's use of the horse. Like,
Mm,
what do we own horses for?
yeah.
This is a question that we should all ask ourselves. And what do we deem as welfare and quality of life for our horses? So they're two separate questions, but I think they very much dictate the trajectory and the path that we take when it comes to this kind of subject.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, we should be looking at this objectively and trying to unpick what our motivations are for choosing a treatment option. Um, so for sure, there are times when giving a horse some sort of pain relieving treatment in terms of, I don't know, steroid injections or something else. I just keep picking on that because it's the
Hmm.
obvious, but you know, there's plenty of other things. In order to keep them working is beneficial to the horse because the work is beneficial to them for other reasons. And I think, you know, for some horses, that's the because of the environment that they're in and the owner's options and these kinds of things. Actually, the ridden work is an important component of that horse's overall health and well-being. So I think in those circumstances, it is, yes, you are enabling continued use,
Hmm.
but that continued use is helping the horse. I think the issue comes more where if you were to remove the work element, would you still choose to give the horse that treatment?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a question that for me I would probably kind of hang my hat on a bit is like, okay, if I took the possibility to keep riding this horse out of the equation and just purely looked at it in its own merits, would you still choose to have that treatment done?
Yeah.
Example being my thoroughbred, who I use as an example for many things, Mary, that you know was my turning point in my horse owning and working career. She had a fractured pedal bone and some collateral ligament damage that was thought to be an old racing injury. And when my vet and I were discussing the problem with the collateral ligament, he was saying there was a fair chance that she would never be sound on that leg, and that a neurectomy was an option. Now, and that, that would keep her being rideable. Now, for me, that was I didn't even, that was a no-brainer. Like, my instant answer to that was just a no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
If she ends up that she's comfortable enough just to be a big giant pet, that's not what I bought a horse for. I bought a horse because I wanted to ride, but I'd taken her on. The full responsibility of her was mine, and if actually the only way to keep her sound enough to be ridden was by stopping her having feeling in one of her feet, that wasn't something I was willing to do. So, but people do that.
And this is one that has come up for me quite a lot recently, is neurectomies in horses. So neurectomies are obviously cutting of the peripheral nerve to alleviate pain. It's just snipping the nerve, so there's not that feedback loop. But and I did a little bit of research on this the other day. So did you know that nerves can actually regenerate over time at around 1 millimeter a day?
Wow, that's quite significant, isn't it?
Which I knew that nerves could regenerate because anyone that's had any kind of surgery, even if it's not specific to a neurectomy, can exhibit nerve pain during the healing process, numbness after an operation, and then the feeling does come back. So that's quite natural. But the snipping of the nerve, obviously that being intentional, the feeling may come back. But my big thing about neurectomies is the fact that neurectomies are usually done in situations like you've just described. They're usually
Mm,
done to alleviate a chronic issue with the lower limbs, as you would hope to think as a last resort, not as a first port of call.
hmm. Yeah,
But it's not going to help the area heal. It's just going to stop the feedback and the sensors, hopefully.
yeah, yeah,
So, a horse that may have had an neurectomy, they very
yeah,
often will carry on with that same workload.
yeah, yeah,
Now, that to me personally, I feel is unethical.
yeah,
And I think that blends into the bigger aspect of it being a welfare issue. Because I
yeah.
think ultimately what we need to ask ourselves is, who are we doing this for? And why are we putting our horses through a certain procedure? Is it for us or is it for them? And
Hmm.
I think there are many different threads and there are many different factors to consider in a situation like this. But I think ultimately, so, a lot of veterinary procedures are really acceptable. They're welfare focused as long as we follow the protocol and actually
Hmm.
use some common sense.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
it. The
for sure.
protocol doesn't always dictate the fact that there's common sense involved. But if we use common sense with how bodies work, as long as we've got, that rest and that rehab program in place, anti-inflammatories where appropriately applied, and the use of controlled exercise, physiotherapy, while meeting our horse's needs within that environment, all of that blends in to helping the nervous system, helping down regulate stress levels, put them into more of that parasympathetic healing response. All of that blends in because it's just promoting the body's ability to heal. But a lot of horses don't actually have access to that as a complete whole.
Yeah.
So I think when we start looking at going a little bit further and offering treatment that effectively is either overriding a pain signal or just discounting one completely, but still doing the same workload, we're not actually taking our horse's body into account. And that's where I think the issue is, because we're aware of the problem, but we've just basically put a plaster on the warning light of the car.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
not beeping at me now, so I can ignore
yeah,
it for now.
yeah,
It might only be 3 months down the line till it starts beeping, and then the tank starts hissing, and then before you know it, the gasket's gone. That's happened to me, hence why it's an example, which no one would be surprised to hear. Uh,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that is what happens because
It's
the
the
body
question,
will,
isn't it?
yes, the body will develop compensation. The body can only take so much. So if we are authorizing these treatments without considerations to adapt what we are doing,
Mm,
then I do feel that in itself is a welfare issue because the horse will break and it's not for us, it shouldn't be for us to put our horses in that kind of position where we're using them as a dispensable object.
yeah.
If we get through this
Yes.
season, if we get another 3 months out of them, then that's
Mm,
absolutely fine. No, 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 no.
yeah. And then what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Broodmare, sold on, happy
Yeah.
hack.
Or
Well,
shot.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yes. I mean, I think pain is there for a reason. Pain is there to tell the body there's a problem and
Yes.
to rest in order to allow it to heal. You know, or to stop overloading a foot because of a problem. Like if and pain relief is important. So we
Hmm.
definitely want to be reducing pain. We don't want to leave an animal in pain. But I feel like there's a big difference between reducing pain for comfort and welfare reasons and completely removing the sign of a problem.
Yes.
So are we listening to the fact that there is pain there or are we silencing it? I think there's a
Yes.
subtle different, well, a not very subtle difference between the two. And the two things I think are motivated very differently.
Hmm.
We want to listen to the pain and we want to help that horse and we want to reduce the pain and we want to help them heal in whatever format that is, or to keep them comfortable, to keep them emotionally regulated. But if we're just going in and just silencing the pain, as you say, you're masking an issue that is still there. For what ends?
Yes, and I can't remember the quote, so I might have to Google it while we're in this conversation. But it's the definition of doing the same thing over and over
Yeah.
is stupid or crazy, something like that.
Definition of madness
That's
is
it.
doing the
Yeah,
same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
that's it. That's it. I think my quotation was a little better actually. No, no,
Probably.
no. Let's quickly move on from that one. I just saw Amy's face. Um, um,
All right.
and I think. That was so nuts. That was so nuts.
Oh God.
So I think the thing, what we need to consider as well is the kind of treatment that that horse is having,
Mm,
and how is that going to the implications for that long term. So I think, if we're kind of working at treating something which is fairly mild and, going back to what you was just saying about pain relief, then yes, if that's helping with the rehabilitation process, then that's what they're
mm,
there for. So if we're treating something that is mild and, the recovery from injury is going to be sustainable for that horse and that horse's body, fantastic. But like you were saying earlier, like if we're repeatedly injecting joints just to keep a chronically lame horse in work, no, let's not be doing that.
yeah.
That's highly unethical because again, going back to our agendas, why are we doing that? Would we be doing that if we weren't riding our horse or if we weren't
Mm,
out competing for the season or if we didn't have a show in 3 weeks' time?
yeah. Are we trying to make that horse truly comfortable, or are we just trying to make them compliant in order to meet our own
Yes.
ends?
And I think the reason we both feel so strongly about this is that we work with some really awesome people who their horses want for nothing and they couldn't give a monkeys if their horses were never ridden again.
Mm,
And they still get absolutely all of their needs met. They have regular bodywork sessions done. They focus on rehabilitation programs, which are never linear. There's a few horses that I've worked with who I absolutely love them, and they are susceptible to tweaking themselves in the field and having a little bit of a setback, even
Yeah.
after the months of rehab that we'll be doing. And yes, it's always going to be disheartening when we're in that kind of situation. It can't not be, but they're not turning around and going, "Oh, well, that's it. I give up. They can be a field ornament." It's
Mm,
that little and often investment, and it creates such a stark contrast between that world and the one where horses are still seen as a commodity, as a thing, as a machine that can just keep going and going and going until you put them out on the scrap heap for parts.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
And I think this is maybe one of the most to the point episodes that I can remember us talking about recently, where we do have quite a blunt take on this because of
Yeah.
the contrast of what we see and how often we see that coming across in the horses that we work with. And actually, I'll rephrase that, not so much the horses that I work with, but the horses that I just openly see in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Because with, quite a lot of the time, I'll have some people come and want to start working with me, but I'll always be really open about my morals and my ethics.
Yeah.
You know, what can I do to support these guys with what's there to work with?
Yeah.
And, there's working conservatively because I'm quite happy to do that under the right situation and under the right circumstances. But I think there are some times where you go, I would really like to help, but there's literally nothing I can do if this is happening in one
Mm.
lane,
Yeah.
and that's the objective when
Yeah.
the needs of the horse are very different. And that's it. It's a need. If their body's struggling, we need to be there to support because it's, a lot of these issues that horses experience, you don't find a lot of these in natural living,
No, indeed.
wild, because horses, let's all be fair, they're not really there to be ridden. They're, oh
Wow.
no, I said this out loud, didn't I? Said it out
Shocking
loud.
statement, Mr. Cooper. Yeah.
And it's just, how they're put together, their structure, their physiology, it just happens to have it just happens to be, you know, they've got a gap between their teeth. So, oh, a mouthpiece can go there, and the shape of their back allows us to comfortably sit there.
Mm,
That's how horses naturally adapted. We didn't sort of,
mhm.
let's not go down the whole breeding route today. That'll probably be another
No, we'll save
subject.
that for another day.
Yes, we will. But but with that, we've taken advantage of what horses can do for us
Mm,
in terms of just from how they look and how they can move.
yeah.
Which horses have been awesome companion animals, but
Like nobody's riding cows.
no,
Well, I mean, you see the odd person that is right, but as a general rule, we are not riding cows.
yeah. And you just got me thinking there with certain animals, like I don't know too much about cows. I've done a little bit of cutting work and I've been around some like conservation cattle
Mm,
before, and obviously, field walks with cows, but I don't know anything really about cow behavior.
no.
So I think at some point last year, I was talking to someone who manages a herd of Highlands, and they were talking to me about the different stress signals that cows exhibit.
Oh, interesting.
And I mean, I don't eat beef. I don't eat cow anymore.
Yeah.
That was just a personal decision a few years ago. I literally woke up and thought, oh, I no longer feel right eating cow, and I just haven't knowingly since. Um, but it was really interesting to kind of get a little bit more know-how about how sensitive cows are. And we know all animals are sensitive, but sometimes until you
Mm,
actually hear it firsthand and at that right point in time, I think it
yeah.
sometimes hits you differently. And when you see it, you then can't unsee it. So cows are actually really vocal, which is one thing that horses aren't. And this is where I'm going with this. So if your horse could turn around and say this hurts, would you still be doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, I've said that before, if horses yelped like dogs do,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of things that we wouldn't do. But I
Yeah.
think that's such a valid point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
And
know one of our upcoming episodes is going to be on pain, recognizing pain in equines
yeah.
and exploring this a little bit more in depth. So we won't go too much into that today, otherwise we're doubling up on topics. But I think looking at that broader picture of are we treating a horse so it may be able to make a comfortable return to work? That is
Mhm.
okay. And we're definitely not sat here saying that if your horse is unwell, if they're experiencing pain, that they shouldn't be ridden again.
No,
I
I
think
think
it's one
this
of the
is
most exciting things to be able to rehab a horse from
100%.
not being ridden. It's one of my geek areas. I really love
Yeah.
this kind of thing, both behaviorally and from a physical perspective, because they're so intrinsically linked. But I think it's going, okay, the possibility is there. So therefore, this procedure may be okay, but it's our attachment to the outcome. Are we
And
doing the
and I think
procedure for an
also,
outcome of ridden or for
yeah,
that to still be a possibility, but equally be okay if not?
yeah. And I feel like that goes in a couple of different directions. So the first thing that immediately springs to mind from that is kind of extending what you were saying there a bit. Are we doing an intervention for occasional support? So, as you say, we've got a problem. We need to be able to fix that problem or support that problem while the horse is in rehab and is getting back to a normal state. Or is it turning into an ongoing dependency?
Yes.
So, are we, so let's say we've had a horse that's got hind end issues. It's had ulcers. The ulcers are being treated, but as part of that, it's also ended up with SI discomfort. We give it a one off set of steroid injections to the SI while everything is unwinding. And as a result of that, the horse is able to release that area. We get a nice recovery, no more injections needed. For me, that's great. That's
Yeah.
perfect opportunity
Totally
to be
agree.
using it. Or is it turning into an ongoing dependency? So we have a set of injections, and then we have to have another set of injections in order to keep the horse being ridden, and then we have to have another set of injections, and the efficacy gets less. Like, are we stopping and looking? Is the baseline shifting?
Yes. Exactly that. Exactly that.
And being able to have the courage to step back and look dispassionately and reassess rather than just automatically repeating. And I think where this then leads on is about our intention as horse owners, stroke riders, and trying to be really honest about our motivations, which is difficult to do.
Hmm.
But I think there's an aspect of this that we've not yet touched on, which is where, we have a horse and that horse represents a thing for us. That horse may represent going out for long rides in the countryside, or it may represent going show jumping, and winning prizes, or doing eventing, or whatever it is the thing that horse represents for us. How do we something happens and that horse, whether it's an acute incident or something that's chronic and building up over time, having the courage to recognize that and being able to let go of what the horse was to us
Hmm.
and creating a new normal for what that horse now represents, rather than desperately trying to cling on to this is my show jumping horse, we must continue doing this, therefore I must keep having these treatments that allow us to keep doing this because this is what we are as a horse and rider pair. This is our identity together.
Yes, we can have a lot of emotional attachment to our horses, and that can be, we can be emotionally invested, but when it
Hmm.
becomes emotionally attached, that can have the opposite effect of what
Yeah,
care we really want to give. And sometimes
yeah,
it's hard to see that when you're in there, because I'm sure we've all been there with animals or people or life at some point.
yeah, yeah, I think so.
Sorry, I threw that one in there as a little bit. That was a bit of a side swipe, wasn't it?
No, but I think it's an important point. And that's why I wanted to talk about this because I think it's there's a lot of different things that feed into it. Like it's not as simple as just, well, I can clearly look at that horse and see that it shouldn't be being ridden, and just shoving injections in it every few months in order to keep it being ridden is clearly an issue. But there are so many other human, emotional, and motivational issues that can kind of feed into this and contradict each other, and I feel like we owe it to the horse to sometimes just stop and step back and
Mm,
ask ourselves the hard questions. Like,
yeah.
why am I choosing to do this? Is it really, really in the horse's best interest? Or is it actually that this is really what, like, I'm trying to tell myself that it's in the horse's best interest, but actually really this is for me because I don't want to lose that identity of what me and my horse do. And, this is a massive financial and emotional investment having this horse. And, by acknowledging that the horse no longer has the physical capacity to do what I want it to do without masking,
Mm.
like that's, I don't think we should diminish what a difficult thing that can be for people, but
No,
we owe
not at
it to
all.
the horses to do it.
It's an uncomfortable truth at the end of the day because, we know that we can try and rationalize. We know that, like you say, with baselines, I think that's, a really excellent point that we slowly adapt to what is normal
Mm-hmm.
until we're so like enmeshed within that situation. And there's obviously all those social pressures involved as well. So,
Mm.
within a pressure cooker or weighted situation like that, it can be really hard to be able to get some perspective about what's actually happening. And I think a lot of it also comes down to education because there's still such a high percentage of people that struggle to read horse body language
Yeah. Yeah.
and the small signs because, nothing starts small.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, like we always say, the information is out there, but I think sort of the point that we're hitting a little bit more so today is when there's that inner knowing and that uncomfortable truth that we are making a choice.
Mm.
But going back to what you just said there about, just going back there to what you said about when what you then do together is different
Mm.
or the new norm.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult, but there are so many other things that you can explore
Yeah.
outside of what you've already done. If you've been eventing for the best part of 4 or 5 years, I mean, we're definitely not sat here saying don't ever ride or don't ever ride your horses again. We
No,
just
not
need
at
to make
all.
sure that
Not
it's
at
done
all.
appropriately. So if you've been eventing for the past 4 or 5 years and things are starting to come up from your horse that they're starting to struggle, it's okay to change. It's okay to have a check-in moment, and a lot of the time when we kind of just take that time out and go, okay, what's available for us now?
Mm.
We can get really creative about it, or there might be something glaringly obvious staring us in the face. It's just finding a new way to do something
Yeah.
so you've still got all the parts of you kept together as a person, because
Yeah.
again, like we've said, that's really difficult to be able to mediate and work through. But by contrast, you're not compromising your horse and you're trying to accommodate them moving forward in a better way within their new norm.
And I agree with everything that you said there. And I think there is also no shame in saying, actually, this particular activity is the thing that I really want to do. This is the thing I really want to do. So this horse now, whatever it is, this issue has come up. I could keep medicating the horse and get it to continue doing the thing that I really want to do, or I could accept that, okay, now the horse would be fine for some nice hacking, but going over big jumps is no longer going to be okay. So I'm going to find this horse a lovely home with someone who also just wants to do nice hacking, and then find a new partner for doing the thing that I really love doing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, people can get all like, well, you absolutely must keep that horse for life, and that's a lovely thing, but it's not necessarily a practical thing. But I think
No.
if the horse's welfare is, the horse goes on to a great home that's been well vetted and can go off and do something that actually is the right thing for that horse and for that new person, and they can have a lovely partnership together, you can then create a new partnership doing the thing that you want. But I feel for me, the line in the sand is making the horse continue to do something when, as I say, if you took the work out of it, you wouldn't be giving that treatment.
Yeah.
When you're
Yeah.
masking, you're hiding the pain signals rather than trying to help.
Or ignoring.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's so many other options
Yeah, 100%.
that work ethically, that work in a welfare base. And like you've said there isn't any shame in any of this
No.
of changing our trajectory, in making a decision that is both for you and for the horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's a partnership at the end of the day, or it should be a partnership.
Yeah.
And you hit really well on that there. And I know a lot of people will say you shouldn't rehome a horse. And that's very subjective to each person. I'm not going to pass any form of comment on that because it is really
Yeah.
subjective.
Yeah.
But part of these conversations, and again, we're over a year now into doing the podcast. These
We
are difficult
are.
conversations to be able to mediate. And
Yeah.
financial pressure is a massive, massive part of horse ownership.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Particularly at the
that
moment,
is,
let's face it, the world's going to rat shit and prices are soaring through the roof, and
yes.
it's a massive, it is a massive financial commitment.
Yeah. So, what are the options there? Do you keep pushing a horse towards working longer than what they should be doing, or do you call time
Mm,
and do like you've suggested? And, some people may agree with that, some people may resonate with that, some people might not be down for that. But like we said, there are so many different factors that interplay into this. Ultimately, we are the guardians of our horse's welfare, whatever choice we make.
yeah. And I think, the final decision point is actually, do you take the decision that it's time to actually have the horse put to sleep?
Mm.
Like, you know, it's not that is not always the worst scenario.
Yes, I think we've said this in the episode we did about grief.
Yeah, I think we did.
Who are we keeping the horse alive for?
Yeah. And actually, that sometimes, I've just said it can be a really good thing for the horse to go to a different home sometimes, but equally sometimes that's not the right thing to do. And there's no, again, I'm sort of veering off a bit onto a different topic now, and we probably need to be getting close to wrapping up the episode. But nothing pees me off more than seeing people putting adverts out for retirement homes for horses that they've had through the whole of their working life that have, have done them a great service, and then suddenly they're trying to look for someone else to take them on when they're 26 years old. No, I'm sorry. At that point, you either you either take care of that horse's needs for the rest of its life, or you have it put to sleep. But that's, we could get into that one and be having another hour's long conversation.
So I'm gonna have to ask the question now because it's just playing around. So saying that it is okay to make a decision and rehome your horse to somewhere where their needs will be met
Yep.
and they will be able to do a much more appropriate workload. Let's use that air
Yep.
quote. Um, so how do you make the distinction between that and then rehoming an older horse?
I think it's very difficult when you've got an old horse who is not, in inverted commas, in work and
Yes,
shouldn't be being ridden,
yes,
that you then say, trying to rehome a 16-hand horse in its mid-20s as a companion, basically so that someone else has to take on the health problems and the management issues of properly managing an older horse, and at some point has to make that decision to let that horse go because you weren't, and this, like this potentially, okay, so let's say this was one of my horses, and I decided in 5 years time, oh, I want Jasmine to go and be a companion for someone.
mm-hmm.
Like she's been here. She's been with this group of horses by that time for 15 years.
Yep.
The horse doesn't understand. You rip them out and shove them into a totally new situation. Like, okay, it might be a nice place on paper, but for the horse, like, it's incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
For me, that horse would be better if the horse has got physical problems and basically needs to live out its days. If you can't do it yourself, or have them somewhere where at least you've got oversight of what's happening and you know that they're okay and that it's the best place for them and that the environment is right and they're healthy, make the brave decision.
Yeah. I was asking the question for clarification of the listeners.
Ah, well, yeah, you know where I stand on this.
I know, I know.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I agree with you there.
I'm not saying there's no place for retirement liveries because I have retirement horses on my track, but
Moving one along at 28 years after being in an established herd, usually because a new one is coming along.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yes.
So,
Before we start getting on to another hour's worth of subject, which I think we are dangerously close to doing,
we are, yeah,
I think ultimately we are needing to look and just reassess our own agenda as to why we are saying yes or why we're saying no to a certain procedure, to a certain workload, to a certain way of doing things with our horses, and ultimately asking the question, are we doing it for them or are we
yeah,
doing it for us?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wise words to end on. I think we
Not
always
been
need
a
to be aware of our motivations.
there's not been a Cooper quote for
No,
a few episodes.
no, no, you've been slacking.
I have. I need to get myself back in shape.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I've enjoyed that conversation and say it's topic that, we've discussed amongst ourselves a number of times, and it was kind of good, I think, to talk it through and to kind of think through some of the nuances. So if you stuck with us throughout that episode, thank you very much for listening.
Yes, well done all.
Yes. As always, we would love it if you would give us a little bit of support by liking the podcast, downloading the episode, following the podcast on whatever platform you're on, and if you feel really generous, give us a cheeky review. It all helps to get the message out there and to get more people listening. We've got some really cool guests coming up, so look out for the upcoming episodes, and thank you all very much.
See you in 2 weeks.